The Great Rebellion! News from the army under General McDowell. Bull Run and Manassas to be attacked today. Beauregard reinforced by Johnston's forces. 20 or 30,000 rebels at Bull Run. General Patterson is superseded by General Banks. General Dix is to command at Baltimore, and there are important movements in Missouri. General Lyon is preparing to attack Governor Jackson and Ben McCulloch. An irregular scouting party surprised at Fort Monroe. Major T.E. Rawlings killed. Some of the pirates of Sumter in port. Special dispatches from Washington. Washington, Saturday, July 20th. As many of you know, the Battle of Bull Run did not go nearly as expected by the media. This week we were tasked with searching the ProQuest historical newspaper database for newspaper to be found, and boy, what a great one did I find. I found the newspaper that directly preceded the Battle of Bull Run, July 21st. This is the New York Times in 1861 from the ProQuest Historical Newspapers database, and boy, howdy, was it loaded with information. I begin to understand why one of Robert E. Lee's first maneuvers when seeking intelligence on enemy movements was to secure a northern newspaper, because you just got a walkthrough of everything the North was up to, from their plans of the Battle of Bull Run to troop movements in the Western Theater. And that's just the headlines. That's not even the entire article. It also gives a good insight as to what to expect. For instance, for Robert E. Lee, when reading northern newspapers, were he to have read this one, now granted this was before Lee really stepped up majorly in the command chain. Bull Run was more Joseph E. Johnston's and P.T.E. Beauregard's battle against Irwin McDowell. But if, hypothetically speaking, let's say that Lee was involved with the Battle of Bull Run, by reading this newspaper, he would have gleaned several important pieces of information. For instance, the first thing he would have gleaned is the enemy estimation of his forces' strength. The article here says that on the 19th of July, General Johnston reinforced the rebels at Bull Run, and their number is variously estimated at 20,000 to 30,000, which means there's a roughly 10,000 man margin of error. Now, let's say that Robert E. Lee actually had a lot less than that. Let's say he had 10,000 men instead of 20 to 30,000. However, using the knowledge that the North estimated his troop numbers to be much higher than he actually had, he could create a misdirection, similar to what was created at the Battle of the Wilderness, between Lee's forces and Grant's forces later in the war, where a group of rebels created giant clouds of dust with their horses, like 30, 40 horsemen, made it look like there was a 10 to 15,000 man army a couple of miles hence, and the Union did not engage, which is good because that would have been the end of that unit. Misdirection being so integral to the art of war, having a knowledge of what your opponent assumes about you can give you all the tools you need to misdirect them, and also to make sure that your dispositions are controlled. Something else to be noted is that you can discern who's going to be at a battle. For instance, just the headline of the article. Firstly, the headline, like the main headline for this issue on July 20th, is The Great Rebellion, which gives you disposition just what the Union thought this was. They didn't think it was a states' rights thing or anything like that. They painted it from day one as a rebellion. That made it seem as though the Confederacy intended to overthrow the existing government. Was that really the case? No. But that's still what the media painted it to be at that time. But the line right under The Great Rebellion is news from the Army under Gen McDowell. Well, so that's who we're going to be fighting today. By utilizing that kind of information, you can figure out what kind of tactics your opponent is going to use, because in battle, commanders tend to utilize the same tactics repeatedly. For instance, Scipio Africanus utilizing his knowledge of the enemy commander, Hannibal. Hannibal utilized double encirclement, not double encirclement, just encirclement. He would essentially take his force, split them, and encircle his opponent and just attack them from all sides until they were defeated. Scipio Africanus utilized his knowledge of Hannibal's battle tactics to encircle the encirclement. He folded his force to accept it and looped around and pincered, tackling into Hannibal's force before he could be encircled. That's the same kind of information that Robert E. Lee would utilize throughout the Civil War to discern who he was fighting and how they would fight and how he in turn needed to fight. But it's really fascinating seeing these articles because, I mean, just from what we know of World War II, if you even took pictures at the New York Harbor, you would be arrested just for what you, like, it didn't matter if you were taking a picture of anything important or not. I just wanted a picture of the Statue of Liberty. Too bad, you're under arrest for potential treason. And yet here we are, like 50, 60 years prior to that. And yeah, everything's telegraphed. Need information? Here, have it. You know who's commanding us. You know how many of we think there are. You know everything that you need to know. It just shows that information was a lot less closely guarded than some would say it should be, and definitely you shouldn't telegraph down a headline. Okay, so that's who's in command. That's how many of us they think there are, etc., etc. No, it's super cringy from a tactical standpoint. So that really does show me, like, before I knew that Robert E. Lee had always gotten the northern newspapers to discern their troop formations, etc., but I never knew just how much information he was really getting from these newspapers until I read this issue of the New York Times from July 20th, 1861. It's just fascinating to read. But one thing that's interesting is that while at the headline it states the Great Rebellion, in the article itself it states that they were secessionist soldiers instead of saying rebel soldiers or Confederate soldiers, because this is before the name the Confederacy had really stuck. By putting it in terms of these are secessionist soldiers, it kind of shows you that the rebellion wasn't really cemented in the minds of the people yet. It wasn't really viewed as though they were uprising against the government. They were just trying to leave. And really, that's honestly what it is, even though for many people, the threat was that the Confederates would attack and overthrow the existing Union government. That was not their intention at all. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly did. I hope you've enjoyed this week of class. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and a decent Black Friday. I don't know how that all goes, but still, I hope you enjoyed it. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.